The rain tapped against the diner windows like impatient fingers, washing the early morning quiet of Oak Street into something that felt lonelier than usual. Emma Blake pulled her worn coat tighter as she pushed through the glass door. 6-year-old Tommy's small hand gripped firmly in hers. At 32, she carried herself with the kind of tired grace that comes from juggling too many responsibilities with too little sleep. Her brown hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail that had seen better days. The white button-down shirt she wore for her waitressing job was clean, but faded from too many wash cycles. Her black slacks had that soft, worn look that comes from being someone's only pair of work pants for too long. But it was Tommy who drew the second glances that morning. 6 years old, with his mother's gentle eyes and his father's stubborn cowlick that refused to lie flat no matter how much Emma smoothed it down. He wore a little jacket that was obviously a hand-me-down, sleeves rolled up to fit his small arms, carrying a backpack that looked like it had traveled more miles than most adults. "Sit right here, baby," Emma whispered, settling him at a corner table near the kitchen. "Mama's got to work, but I'll check on you every few minutes. Okay?" Tommy nodded with the kind of serious understanding that breaks your heart in children that young. He'd been through this before, knew the drill. When babysitters canceled at the last minute and Emma couldn't afford to miss another shift, he became her shadow. Emma had graduated summa cum laude with a degree in elementary education, had dreams of teaching children, of making a difference in young lives, of using her love for learning to inspire the next generation. But life had other plans. When Tommy's father died in a construction accident 3 years ago, those dreams got packed away like winter clothes in summer. Teaching positions were competitive, and student teaching didn't pay the bills. Waitressing at Murphy's Diner did. Not well, but enough to keep a roof over their heads and food on their table? Barely. The morning shift was usually manageable. Tommy could sit quietly with a coloring book, maybe a piece of toast if the cook was feeling generous. He'd learned to make himself small, invisible, understanding somehow that his presence was a favor Emma couldn't afford to ask for, but desperately needed. That Tuesday started like any other. Emma tied her apron, checked the coffee levels, and began the familiar dance of taking orders, refilling cups, and keeping customers happy. But something felt different. There was an older gentleman at table 6 who kept glancing toward Tommy's corner. Not in an annoying way, but with the kind of thoughtful attention that suggested he was seeing something that mattered. He was probably in his 70s, well-dressed in a way that spoke of comfort without flashiness. Gray hair neatly combed, hands that looked like they'd worked hard but had been well cared for. He ordered coffee, black, and wheat toast, no butter. Simple order, generous tipper. The kind of customer Emma appreciated but didn't have time to think much about, except he kept watching. When Tommy dropped his crayon and it rolled under a nearby table, the man retrieved it without being asked. When Tommy whispered "thank you," with the careful politeness Emma had taught him, the man smiled in a way that suggested he remembered being 6 years old himself. "Your boy?" he asked Emma during a quiet moment. "Yes, sir. I'm sorry if he's bothering you. My babysitter canceled and—" "No bother at all," the man said gently. "He's well behaved. You should be proud." Emma felt that familiar tightness in her throat that came when strangers showed kindness to Tommy. "Thank you. He's a good kid." The man finished his coffee, left a $20 tip on a $7 check, and headed for the door. But before he left, he turned back one more time, looked at Tommy coloring quietly in his corner, then at Emma refilling sugar dispensers with practiced efficiency. Like he was memorizing something important. You're watching this story unfold from wherever you are right now, at home, in your car, taking a break at work. Leave a comment and let me know where you're watching from. I love reading every single one of your shares. The kindness lasted exactly 47 minutes. That's when Marcus Murphy, owner of Murphy's Diner and Emma's boss for the past 8 months, emerged from his office and spotted Tommy. "What the hell is this?" His voice cut through the morning quiet like a cleaver through bone. Emma felt her stomach drop to her shoes. She'd been hoping to get through the shift unnoticed, maybe explain later when she could find the right words. But there were no right words for desperation dressed up as poor judgment. "Mr. Murphy, I can explain." "Can you explain why there's a kid sitting in my restaurant during business hours? Can you explain why you think this is some kind of daycare center?" The few customers in the diner suddenly found their coffee cups fascinating. Tommy looked up from his coloring book with the wide-eyed expression of a child who knew trouble when he heard it, even if he didn't understand what he'd done wrong. "Sir, my babysitter canceled at the last minute, and I couldn't afford to miss another shift. He's not bothering anyone. He's a liability," Murphy snapped. "What if he gets hurt? What if a customer complains? What if the health inspector walks in and sees a kid sitting in my dining room?" Emma's hands were shaking as she untied her apron. 3 years of practice had taught her to recognize when a situation couldn't be salvaged. "I understand you're upset. Maybe I could bring him to the back room, or maybe you could find a job that doesn't require professional boundaries. You clearly don't understand." The words hung in the air like smoke from a grease fire. "You're firing me? I'm protecting my business. Clean out your locker. You're done." Emma felt the world tilt sideways. This job wasn't much, but it was everything. Health insurance through the state program, enough money to cover rent on their tiny apartment, tips that occasionally stretched to cover Tommy's shoes when he outgrew the old ones. "Mr. Murphy, please. I'll find someone to watch him. This won't happen again, I promise. It won't happen again because you won't be here for it to happen again." The cruelty was casual, delivered like he was commenting on the weather. Emma realized she was crying and tried to stop, tried to hold it together until she could get Tommy somewhere private. But 6-year-olds see everything. "Mama," Tommy's voice was small, confused. "Are we leaving?" "Yes, baby. We're going home." She gathered his coloring book and crayons with hands that wouldn't stop trembling, helped him into his little jacket, walked to the back room to collect her purse from the employee area. When she returned, Murphy was wiping down her station like she'd never existed. "My paycheck," she asked quietly. "You'll get what you're owed, minus the cost of disruption to my business and the time spent dealing with the situation." Which meant she'd get nothing. Emma knew better than to argue. Men like Murphy always had the last word, and she couldn't afford to make enemies when she'd need references for the next job, if there was a next job. The rain had stopped, but the sidewalk was still wet as Emma and Tommy stepped outside. She held his hand and tried to figure out how to explain why Mama was crying, why they'd left work early, why everything felt broken again. "Did I do something bad?" Tommy asked as they walked toward the bus stop. "No, baby, you didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes grown-ups make decisions that don't make sense, and kids get caught in the middle. Like when Daddy went to heaven?" Emma stopped walking, crouched down to Tommy's level right there on the wet sidewalk, not caring who saw or what they thought. "Yes, sweetheart, like that. Sometimes things happen that aren't anyone's fault, but they still hurt." She'd been a straight-A student at State University, Dean's List every semester, Phi Beta Kappa, education major with a concentration in early childhood development. She'd written lesson plans that made her professors cry with pride, designed classroom environments that fostered creativity and critical thinking. Now she was 32 years old, unemployed, with $17 in her checking account, and a 6-year-old who deserved so much better than a mother who couldn't even keep a waitressing job. The bus ride home was quiet. Tommy colored in his book while Emma stared out the window and tried to calculate how long their savings would last. Rent was due in 12 days. The electric bill needed to be paid by Friday. Tommy needed new sneakers because his current ones had holes that let in water. She'd figure it out. She always did. But sitting on that bus, watching her son color carefully within the lines because he was the kind of kid who followed rules even when the world didn't follow rules for him, Emma felt something crack inside her chest. Not break completely, just crack. Like a window that's been hit by too many stones and finally starts a spiderweb. She'd put it back together. She always did. But first, she needed to let herself feel how much it hurt. Arthur Hendricks had been thinking about the woman and her boy for 3 days straight. At 74, Arthur had seen enough of life to recognize when something mattered. And that Tuesday morning at Murphy's Diner, watching a young mother try to work while keeping her child quiet and invisible, had mattered in ways he was still trying to understand. He'd built and sold 2 successful businesses in his lifetime, made enough money to be comfortable without being flashy, lost his wife to cancer 5 years ago, and spent most of his time since then trying to figure out what to do with all the love he still had to give. which is why he found himself back at Murphy's Diner on Friday morning, ordering the same coffee and toast, hoping to see the waitress with the tired eyes and gentle hands. Instead, he found a different server, younger, chatty, someone who seemed to enjoy her job in a way that suggested she'd never had to choose between working and finding childcare. "Excuse me," Arthur said when she brought his check. "There was a waitress here earlier this week. Brown hair, had a little boy with her." The girl's expression shifted. "Oh, Emma? She doesn't work here anymore. Did she find another job?" "Mr. Murphy fired her for bringing her kid to work." The girl lowered her voice. "Between you and me, it was pretty harsh. She's a single mom, you know. Good worker, too. Never complained. Always picked up extra shifts." Arthur left another generous tip and walked out of the diner with something burning in his chest that felt suspiciously like purpose. He'd made his fortune by noticing things other people missed and acting on information while it was still useful. This felt like one of those moments. It took him 3 phone calls to track down Emma Blake's address, a friend who knew someone who worked at the electric company, the kind of small-town networking that came in handy when you'd lived in the same place for 40 years and treated people well along the way. The apartment complex on Elm Street looked like it was holding itself together through sheer determination. Not falling apart exactly, but definitely tired. The kind of place where young families started out and older folks ended up, united by the simple economics of making ends meet. Arthur climbed 2 flights of stairs that creaked ominously and found apartment 2B. He could hear voices through the thin door. A woman's voice, patient and warm, helping someone sound out words. Reading practice, he realized. Mother helping son with homework. The sound made his chest tight in ways he hadn't expected. Arthur knocked gently. The voices stopped. Footsteps approached the door, paused. He heard the soft scrape of someone looking through the peephole. "Can I help you?" Emma's voice, cautious but polite. "My name is Arthur Hendricks. I was at Murphy's Diner on Tuesday morning. I saw you and your son there." Long pause. "I'm sorry, I don't understand." "I'd like to talk to you if you have a few minutes, about what I saw, about an idea I've been working on." Another pause. Arthur could imagine her calculating risks, weighing the safety of talking to a stranger against curiosity about what he might want. The door opened, but only as far as the security chain allowed. Emma looked older than she had at the diner, more tired, like the past few days had been harder than he'd imagined. "I don't need charity," she said quietly, "if that's what this is about." "It's not charity," Arthur replied. "It's an opportunity, for both of us." She studied his face through the crack in the door. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied some internal safety check, because she closed the door, unlatched the chain, and opened it properly. "Tommy, come here, please," she called over her shoulder. The boy appeared at her side, homework worksheet still in his small hand. He looked at Arthur with the careful politeness of a child who'd been taught to be respectful to adults, but cautious with strangers. "This is the man from the restaurant," Emma told him. "Do you remember?" Tommy nodded. "You picked up my crayon." "That's right. And you said thank you very nicely." Arthur looked around the small apartment, clean but sparse, furniture that had clearly been purchased secondhand but was well maintained, children's books stacked neatly on a makeshift shelf, a kitchen table that doubled as homework station and dining room. Everything about the space spoke of someone making the best of limited resources with unlimited care. "Mrs. Blake, what I saw at the diner the other morning got me thinking about something I've been wanting to do for a long time. I've been looking for the right way to start a foundation that helps single mothers, not just with money, but with the practical stuff, childcare during work hours, job training, maybe eventually housing assistance." Emma's expression didn't change. "That sounds very generous. What I can't figure out is how to do it right, how to help without insulting people, how to create something that actually works instead of just making me feel good about myself." He paused, watching her process what he was saying. "I think you and Tommy could help me figure that out, not as recipients of charity, but as partners in building something that matters." For the first time since he'd arrived, Emma's carefully controlled expression cracked slightly. "I don't understand what you're asking." "I'm asking if you'd consider helping me start a charity, one that's designed by single mothers for single mothers. Beginning with the question, what would have helped you most on Tuesday morning? Emma stared at Arthur Hendricks like he'd just spoken in a foreign language she almost but didn't quite understand. You want me to help you start a charity? I want you to help me start the right charity. There's a difference. Tommy had settled back at the kitchen table with his homework, but Emma could tell he was listening to every word. 6-year-olds were excellent at pretending not to pay attention while absorbing everything happening around them. Mr. Hendricks, I appreciate what you're trying to do, but Arthur, please. Arthur, she corrected herself automatically. I'm not qualified to run a nonprofit. I'm a waitress who just got fired for bringing my kid to work. I don't have a business background or experience with charity work or... Do you know what it feels like to choose between keeping your job and leaving your child with someone you don't trust? The question stopped her mid-sentence. Yes. Do you know what it's like to apply for jobs and wonder if you should mention that you have a child? Because some employers will see it as a liability instead of understanding that parents often make the most reliable employees? Yes. Do you know what it's like to love your child so much that you'll swallow your pride and ask for help? But only if that help doesn't come with judgment or conditions that make you feel smaller than you already do? Emma felt tears threatening and blinked them back. Yes. Then you're more qualified than anyone I could hire. Arthur settled into the chair across from her, moving carefully like someone whose bones remembered being younger. Emma, I've been successful in business because I learned to identify real problems and create practical solutions. But this isn't my problem to solve. It's your problem. I just happen to have resources that could help solve it. I can't accept charity. The words came out more forcefully than she'd intended. I won't be anyone's project or poster child or... What if it wasn't charity? What if it was a job? Emma went quiet. I'm talking about hiring you to develop and manage a foundation that addresses the specific challenges facing single parents. Real salary, health benefits, the works. You'd be building something from the ground up, which means you'd have control over how it works and who it serves. I don't have nonprofit experience. Neither did I when I started my first business. Experience can be learned. Understanding can't be taught. You understand this problem in ways I never could. Tommy looked up from his worksheet. Mama, what's a foundation? Emma realized she didn't actually know how to explain it in 6-year-old terms. Arthur leaned forward slightly. A foundation is like a group of people who get together to help other people solve problems, he said. Like if lots of kids in the neighborhood needed help with their homework, someone might start a foundation to find tutors and set up study spaces. Oh, Tommy considered this. What problem would Mama's foundation solve? Arthur looked at Emma, clearly letting her answer that question. It would help parents who have to work but don't have safe, affordable places for their children to stay, she said carefully. Like when Mama had to bring you to the restaurant because our babysitter was sick. That's a good problem to solve, Tommy announced with the certainty of someone who lived that problem firsthand. Emma felt something shifting inside her chest, not the crack from earlier, but something else, something that felt dangerously like hope. What would this actually look like? She asked Arthur. I don't know yet. That's why I need you. But I'm thinking we start small. Maybe partner with local businesses to create child-friendly workspaces. Maybe develop a network of vetted, affordable childcare providers. Maybe eventually we look at housing assistance or job training programs. He pulled a business card from his wallet and placed it on the table between them. I've set up a meeting with my lawyer for next week, just to explore the legal framework for getting something like this started. Would you be willing to come? Not to commit to anything, just to hear what's possible? Emma picked up the card. Heavy paper stock, simple design. Arthur Hendricks, business consultant. A phone number and email address. I need to think about this. Of course. Take all the time you need. Arthur stood to leave, then paused at the door. Emma, what happened at the diner on Tuesday wasn't your fault. You were doing what good mothers do, finding a way to take care of your child while meeting your responsibilities. The system failed you, not the other way around. After he left, Emma sat at the kitchen table while Tommy finished his homework. The business card lay between them like a small white bridge to a future she hadn't imagined an hour ago. Mama, Tommy said without looking up from his math problems, I think you should help that man. He seems nice. And he picked up my crayon without me asking. Emma smiled despite herself. Is that your criteria for trustworthy adults? Crayon retrieval? No, but it's a start. That night after Tommy was asleep, Emma sat on her narrow couch and tried to imagine herself as someone who ran a foundation. Someone who had business cards and office space, and the authority to solve problems instead of just surviving them. It felt impossible and inevitable at the same time, like something that couldn't possibly work, but somehow had to. The lawyer's office smelled like leather and confidence, two things Emma hadn't encountered much in her daily life. She'd borrowed a blazer from her neighbor and tried to look like someone who belonged in meetings about founding nonprofit organizations. But sitting in the waiting room, surrounded by diplomas and awards that suggested serious money and serious power, she felt like exactly what she was, a recently unemployed waitress who was in way over her head. Arthur arrived precisely on time, wearing the same kind of understated confidence he displayed at her apartment. He greeted her like they were business partners instead of near strangers, which somehow made her sit up straighter. Ready for this? He asked. I have no idea what I'm ready for, Emma admitted. Perfect. That's exactly how I felt when I started my first company. The lawyer turned out to be a woman about Emma's age, with the kind of sharp intelligence that cuts straight through confusion to get to the heart of things. So you want to start a foundation that addresses childcare challenges for working parents, she said, reviewing the notes Arthur had sent ahead. Tell me about the specific problems you're trying to solve. Emma looked at Arthur, who gestured for her to take the lead. It's not just about childcare, Emma began, surprising herself with how clear her thoughts became once she started talking. It's about the fact that our economy expects parents to work like they don't have children and parent like they don't have jobs. The lawyer leaned forward slightly interested. When my babysitter cancels at the last minute, I have to choose between losing pay I can't afford to lose or bringing my son somewhere that might not be appropriate. When I apply for jobs, I have to decide whether to mention that I have a child, knowing some employers will see it as a liability. When Tommy gets sick, I have to choose between taking him to the doctor and keeping my job. Emma realized she was speaking faster, the words flowing out like water through a broken dam. And it's not just about me. Every single mother I know faces these same impossible choices every single day. We're not asking for handouts or special treatment. We're asking for systems that acknowledge that parents are part of the workforce and children are part of our community. The room was quiet for a moment. That's the clearest mission statement I've heard in 20 years of nonprofit law, the lawyer said finally. Over the next 2 hours, they outlined the framework for what they started calling Tommy's Corner, a foundation dedicated to creating practical solutions for working parents. The name had come from Arthur, who'd pointed out that Tommy's quiet presence in the corner of Murphy's diner had sparked the whole idea. It's not about the child being hidden away, he'd explained. It's about creating corners where children are welcome while parents work. Safe spaces, supported spaces. By the end of the meeting, Emma found herself holding incorporation papers and a job offer that felt too good to be real. $40,000 a year to start, Arthur had said. Health insurance, dental, vision, 2 weeks paid vacation, sick leave, and, this part is non-negotiable, child-friendly office space where Tommy is always welcome. Emma stared at the numbers on the salary offer. It was more money than she'd ever made, doing work that mattered more than anything she'd ever done. I don't understand why you're doing this, she said as they walked out of the lawyer's office. Arthur stopped on the sidewalk and looked at her with the kind of serious expression that meant he was about to say something important. 5 years ago, my wife died after a 2-year battle with cancer. We never had children. Spent 40 years building businesses and accumulating wealth, telling ourselves we'd start a family when the timing was right. He paused, watching traffic move past them on the busy street. The timing was never right, and now I'm 74 years old with more money than I can spend and no family to spend it on. I've been looking for a way to do something meaningful with what I have left. Emma waited, sensing there was more. What I saw at the diner wasn't just a mother struggling with childcare. It was a reminder that there are families out there fighting battles I never had to fight, solving problems I never had to solve. You and Tommy gave me a chance to be useful again. So this is about you feeling useful? Arthur smiled. Partly, but mostly it's about the fact that you took a bad situation and handled it with grace and creativity. You protected your child while meeting your obligations. You found a solution that worked for everyone until someone decided it didn't work for them. He gestured toward the lawyer's building behind them. I can provide money and business experience, but this foundation will only succeed if it's built by someone who understands the real problems and can create real solutions. That's not me. That's you. Emma looked down at the papers in her hand. Official documents that would legally establish Tommy's Corner as a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting working parents. What if I mess this up? What if you don't? That evening, Emma sat at her kitchen table with Tommy working on his reading homework beside her and called her sister in Oregon for the first time in 6 months. You're going to do what? Sarah's voice crackled through the phone. Start a nonprofit foundation. I think, Emma, honey, are you sure this isn't some kind of scam? Wealthy strangers don't just show up and offer to fund your dreams. I know how it sounds, but Sarah, what if it's real? What if this is the chance I've been waiting for without knowing I was waiting for it? What if it's not? Emma looked around her small apartment, at the carefully maintained furniture and the precisely organized space that made the most of very little. At Tommy, sounding out words with determined concentration. Then I'll be exactly where I am now, except I'll have spent a few months trying something meaningful instead of just trying to survive. After she hung up, Tommy looked up from his book. Mama, are we going to have our own office? Maybe, baby. How would you feel about that? Tommy considered this with the seriousness he brought to all important questions. Will there be a corner for me? The whole place will be your corner. Then I think it's a good idea. How do you feel hearing this story unfold? Leave your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to hit subscribe for Hidden Heroine to catch more incredible stories like this one. 6 months later, Emma stood in the lobby of what had once been a struggling community center and was now the first official location of Tommy's Corner. The transformation had taken every ounce of creativity, determination, and collaborative problem-solving she'd developed over years of making impossible situations work somehow. The main space had been divided into flexible work areas where parents could bring laptops and handle administrative tasks while their children played in supervised, child-proof spaces visible from every angle. Professional child care providers moved between activity stations, creating an environment that was part office, part playground, and entirely revolutionary. Mama, look! Tommy called from the reading corner, where he was helping a younger child sound out words from a picture book. I'm teaching someone else now. Emma smiled, watching her son demonstrate the patience and gentleness she'd tried to model during their own homework sessions. He'd grown 3 inches and gained 20 pounds of confidence since that rainy Tuesday morning at Murphy's Diner. The foundation had started small, just Emma, Arthur, and a borrowed conference room where they'd spent weeks interviewing single parents about their most pressing challenges. What they'd discovered was that childcare was just the tip of an iceberg that included transportation, job training, mental health support, and financial literacy. So they'd built a comprehensive response. Tommy's Corner now offered drop-in childcare for parents attending job interviews, skills training workshops taught in the evenings when volunteer babysitters could watch children. A partnership with the local bus system provided transportation vouchers. Counseling services helped parents navigate everything from divorce proceedings to depression, but the heart of it remained that original vision, spaces where children were welcome while parents worked. Emma. Arthur appeared at her elbow, carrying 2 cups of coffee and wearing the kind of satisfied expression she'd learned meant he'd just received good news. The replication study came back from Portland. Emma accepted the coffee gratefully. And 3 other cities want to implement the Tommy's Corner model. We've got foundation grants, municipal support, and a waiting list of parents who want to participate. Emma felt that familiar flutter of possibility mixed with terror. Growth meant success, but it also meant complexity. More staff to manage, more funding to secure, more ways for things to go wrong. We'll need to hire regional coordinators, she mused. People who understand the local challenges but can implement the core principles. Already working on it. I've got a recruiter reaching out to social workers and early childhood educators in each city, people with direct experience supporting families in crisis. Emma watched a mother at one of the workstations finish what looked like a job application, while her toddler played contentedly in the nearby activity area. The woman had been coming for 3 weeks, slowly building the confidence and skills needed to re-enter the workforce after 2 years of staying home with her child. "You know what the best part is?" Emma said. "What's that?" "We're not just helping individual families. We're changing the conversation, making it normal for workplaces to be family-friendly, proving that supporting parents makes economic sense." Arthur nodded toward the bulletin board where local employers had posted job openings specifically targeting Tommy's Corner participants, companies that had learned that parents often made the most dedicated, efficient employees. "Your idea about the business partnerships was brilliant," he said. "Turns out employers are willing to pay for pre-screened, trained workers who come with built-in motivation to succeed." Emma laughed. "My idea? You mean my desperate attempt to convince someone to hire single mothers?" "Same thing." As the afternoon wound down, Emma helped parents gather their children and belongings, scheduling follow-up appointments and celebrating small victories. A successful job interview, a completed GED application, a child's improved reading level. Tommy appeared at her side as she locked up the building, carrying his backpack and the kind of tired satisfaction that came from a day well spent. "Mama?" "Yes, baby." "I'm proud of you." Emma felt tears prick her eyes. "I'm proud of you too, sweetheart." "Are we going to help more families tomorrow?" "Every day if we can manage it." Tommy took her hand as they walked toward the bus stop, past the small bronze plaque Arthur had insisted on installing by the front door. Tommy's Corner, where families work together to build better futures. Sometimes being fired was the best thing that could happen to you. Sometimes one act of desperation could spark a movement. Sometimes the corner you got pushed into became the foundation for everything you were meant to build. If you believe that kindness and resilience always create miracles, hit subscribe for Hidden Heroine and help us spread these heartwarming stories.